Hello everybody and welcome to this week's Unpacking video. We are so thankful that you took time out of your week to sit down and watch. If you haven't already, we encourage you to subscribe to our YouTube channel and to leave us a like and a comment as well. With that, let's go ahead and get into this week's Unpacking video. Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Unpacking. And this week we are sitting down with Josh Schmidt. Josh gave our message on Sunday, and his message was about radical faith, carrying on the radical series. First and foremost, it was a fantastic message. Super, super good. Such a cool testimony at the end, which we'll get into in just a little bit. But I want to address the elephant in the room. And that was the shirt that you wore on Sunday, which you're wearing now. And we can actually see the full thing. It's from Katie's company, Legiticus, right?
Yep.
And for those of you who may have seen the shirt on Sunday, all you could see was the word sex across Josh's chest. And it's actually a really cool shirt. It says pro-marital sex, which, I mean, we are pro-marital sex.
And it's the Song of Solomon is the book of reference. And Katie, she's always edgy with it. She brings a valuable message, but slight edgy. And I like that. And I've preached in a jacket before, and it always flings open and moves. And apparently this week, my jacket was very much not moving and stayed in the same place. And so
we said yesterday, it looked like you put double-sided tape on the inside of your jacket because it perfectly just framed right here.
That was unintentional, but it kept you focused, kept you engaged and wondering if that's what I was going to talk about. And it had nothing to do with it.
Oh, we thought it was funny. I thought that it'd be a funny idea to just kick the video off like that and address that because it was a topic of conversation after church and yesterday at staff. And I know Lacey leaned over to me during the message and she goes, "All you can see is sex on his shirt." And I looked and I was like, "Yep, that's all you can see."
It was completely unintentional, but glad you hung out and listened to all of the message waiting for that punchline, and you didn't get it. No, it's just something I love supporting Katie. I love supporting her vision, but I think there's just things within the church that we don't talk about enough that the world has taken and completely done away with the right meaning. And I think they've tried to demonize a lot of things. They've tried to make a lot of things that God created evil. And I think that's something that the enemy does is everything that God creates, he tries to come up with something negative about that. I think he
brings a counterfeit to it.
He does. And I think you see that controversial topics, but I think you see that with a rainbow. Like initially he creates it as a promise. Then the enemy comes in, distorts it and transitions and turns that to something to represent a group of people. And I think we have to be willing to, I think it ties into faith, but I think it has to just be a boldness to preach the truth, to speak the truth, not to intentionally offend people, but a lot of times offense is happening because there's conviction that they don't want to address. And so I think radical faith ties into being bold to preach the word, to talk about things in the Bible that are in there. It talks about sex inside of marriage. It talks about sin. It talks about all these things that a lot of people in the big church won't address, or they try to brush around it and make it surface level, try to make it fitting and not offensive. Well, the word of God is offensive. The gospel's offensive. What Jesus did is offensive, and that's offensive to our flesh, to bring correction, to bring conviction, to be able to walk out how he's called us. So I think it all kind of ties in together. And I think some people are a little bit more timid about being super bold. Sometimes I like to be right in people's faces. And whether it's a message on a shirt, whether it's living in such a way that you trust God to do something miraculous, I think in a biblical context, I think we need that. I think we need people that are willing to take a stand and unapologetically talk the truth, 100% truth. And when you look at the Bible, it tells you that in that season when you're in the covenant of marriage, you're in covenant with him, that's to be blessed. That's a way of worship, that there's so many things that the world has distorted. And so now you look at it as this sinful thing that it's not at all. So I think in being radical in faith, it also allows us to be radical in 100% honest, 100% truth. What does the Bible say? The Bible tells us things about sin. The Bible tells us things about things of the world, and it has nothing to do with my message. But there's a lot of churches that won't talk anything that has to do with abortion, with the LGBTQ communities. They don't want to address that because they don't want to offend anybody.
Right.
But the radical faith is the truth of the word, and the word tells us what is and isn't, and how things should be. And so you get looks. I intentionally wore it to Costco with my wife and 3 boys last week, 2 weeks ago, whenever it was, to see if there's conversation.
Yeah.
Nobody said anything, but a lot of people looked. And sometimes it's just taking a negative message and making a positive message out of it. And I think that's something that's been twisted and demonized and made so bad. Why not promote it in a healthy way? Because if our kids don't hear about that now, if our kids aren't taught that now, then they fall into the same things that we did, and they're doing things before marriage, or then they get into a marriage and they don't have that because they've always been told it's bad.
Yeah.
And so I think we have to bring things with the right context, but we have to bring them with truth, and we have to bring them in hope and faith, but you can't deviate from what God says.
Yeah. Oh, that's good. We ain't even gotten into the message, and you're already spitting facts. Well, that's a great segue into unpacking your message. Like you said, your message this weekend was about radical faith. And man, if there's somebody who could preach a message like this, it's you. I mean, you've had to walk in faith for the last, all your life you've walked in faith, but especially over the last, I'd say 5 years, you've really been strong in walking in your faith, or walking in faith, and through a season where nobody could ever imagine that they would ever be, a season where a lot of people would turn away from God or maybe even lose their faith, In that, you stayed faithful. You stayed in a spot where you have that radical faith. But your message this weekend was all about that. So let's go ahead and get into unpacking your message about radical faith. So I'll let you take it.
Yeah, it's a journey and a process, and kind of something I mentioned on Sunday is that our faith is a perfection process, right? And it says that Jesus is the perfecter, the author and perfecter of our faith. And to perfect something, if you're trying to perfect a job, if you're trying to perfect a hobby, they say that it takes thousands of hours to perfect that one thing. Mm-hmm. And so if that's a statistic for business or a hobby, then I think perfecting our faith is probably going to be even longer of a journey, because it doesn't end. There's not a perfection point. And I think as I was putting this together, like, Jesus was perfect. Jesus didn't sin. Well, the perfection of our faith is not to never sin. It's to not ever fall short. It's to not ever mess up, because he knows we're going to. But the perfection is getting to a point where you trust him in everything. You trust him for everything. And it is something to walk out. And it's not always easy. It's not always convenient. But I think when you can move from a place, especially in pain and hurt, where he's everything, and that's your belief. And, you'd mentioned 5 years back, well, when I went through the divorce, my hope in that was that my 2 boys at the time would see the faithfulness of God, that they would see me as their dad not turn away, that they would see my faith deepen, that they would see my worship deepen. And all I knew, there were so many times that that's all I had. That's all I could lean on. That was the only thing. I mean, I had support, but that was the only thing that kept me from going crazy. And so when you want to see that and you want that to be the example, you're not really given, you can either run in that type of faith or you can run away from it. And so I made the choice early on that I was going to run in it, to the point that I had faith radically in God that all of the rumors, everything that was going on, that he would, and out loud I prayed several times. I said, God, I will not defend myself. Either you protect my character or you restore my character. And I think that ties with the story of Abraham and Isaac. Like, he was so much in faith and belief of what God could do, knowing his character, that it was either you're going to provide something as a sacrifice or you're going to resurrect what I've provided as a sacrifice.
Yeah.
And so when that becomes your choice, it is bold. It is uncomfortable. It's not status quo for most people in the church, because people want the fire card of I believe, but then they still don't want to be in the trenches to show that. They don't want that to grow. They don't want the journey. They love the concept of believing God for radical healing, but they won't be faithful. They won't press. They won't lay everything down. And so it's a journey for sure.
Yeah. Well, this walk that you've been on over the course of 5 years is you've gotten to see God's faithfulness with your faith in him being radical in your faith. You've gotten to see his radical faithfulness for you as well.
Crazy.
Yeah.
Like crazy.
It's been amazing. I mean, just outside looking in, I haven't walked through what you had to walk through, but I've seen you in a season or in seasons where the unimaginable happens, tragedy or incredible loss or whatever it might be takes place. And not once, or at least from my perspective, not once have you faltered in that. You've had your moments. It was part of your message. Golly, I think it was back in, was it the gift series that you were talking about? You've had those moments where you've been talking to God and you're like, what the F, what's going on? And not at God, but just being raw and vulnerable with him, being completely and utterly unashamed of your humanity, and just coming to him as you are, inviting him into that moment of your humanity and saying, God, I don't understand. This is a really crappy situation and I don't understand what's going on. But even in that, even in the midst of not knowing what's going on, you remain faithful. And from that, you've gotten to see his faithfulness in your life. So what I want to ask is, I feel like I know what your answer is going to be, but the main thing, and I feel like it's going to be with Elise, is seeing God's faithfulness in that. And if there's another area, please let me know as well. But I wanted to ask, what is an area that you've seen God's radical faithfulness in your life? You've been radically faithful, but God is even more radically faithful to us than we are to him. So what is an area?
Yeah. It's incredible to see, and it's been an honor I've had yourself and a couple other people just continue to encourage about how faithful I've been, but it's all not doing things to get something from God, but just trusting him enough to know that he's good and walking in the faithfulness. And it's Elise is beyond. I told all of my friends when I started dating, when I was ready to start dating, that I was going to marry a smoke show. And several times people were like, oh, Elise. And I had seen her. I knew she was beautiful. But I was not, at the time, I was not looking for anybody within our church because of my position. I didn't want people to think that it was just a position thing, that I was taking advantage of my position. So trusting God and knowing and hearing all of those friends say that, hearing even at one point, Pastor Darren had said something about it, and I knew and I'd seen her, but was trying to be so aware of my position, everything else that came with that. And my thought was that if it ever didn't work, I didn't want somebody to be uncomfortable enough that they couldn't stay.
Right.
And so I was just really kind of avoiding that altogether. Not anything to do with her, not anything other than just trying to protect people and be aware of where I was at. And
being respectful and honorable of the position that you hold.
Absolutely.
And of other people in the church.
And I think there's a lot of people that slip up in that. And so I was very much aware of that. But just continuing to trust God, continuing to just radically know. And I'd prayed and prayed and prayed that when that happened, and I prayed several times, like I didn't know if it was going to be the first person I dated, but the first person, I was hopeful that the first person that I was in a relationship with was going to be the one that I married. And that was for protection of them, protection of me, protection of Elijah and Benaiah, that there wasn't going to be this rigorous process of people being in and out. And so just trusting God, like she had met the boys, but like we weren't hanging out, we weren't doing dates with them. We were trying to structurally figure out if it was going to work, and trusting God to a point that to a lot of people's timelines, which if you know me well enough, you know that I don't really care what people think, was extremely fast.
Yeah.
And I mean, just now it's been a year that we started talking and dating, and then we got engaged in October and were married in December. And so to some people that's careless, and to some people that's not taking the time, but I believe that that's God's faithfulness of being radically faithful to him. Is I knew 2 weeks. She didn't know that I knew it 2 weeks, and she does now, but within 2 weeks I knew that that's who it was going to be.
Yeah.
But when you're faithful to God and you allow God to move, he can take things that you never expected. I joke with her, and it drives people bonkers, drives her bonkers. I love to laugh, but I always joke that I have way outkicked my coverage. And I've even joked with people that I look like I submitted a form to get to hang out with somebody that was really hot for a day, and I won. It drives her nuts. But when you trust God and know that he can do it, and the prayer that I prayed just over and over is that when I got remarried, that my marriage would be an image of the love of Jesus.
Yeah.
And that's a really bold thing to pray, because that's what marriage is supposed to look like. But to pray that, there's a weight that comes with that. That means that people are going to be watching you. That means that there's a platform with that. That means that there's a respect and a trust with that. But to step into something of him that only he can orchestrate in a timeline that he can prepare to be abundantly blessed like we have been, I think it's coming into a place where people can look and say, okay, that's different. And that was my prayer in being single. That was my prayer, that my marriage would be an image of the love of Christ for his church.
Yeah.
And what does that look like? For me, that's radically in faith, trusting him that he would bring somebody that would be a helpmate, that would be a best friend, that would build a home. But for me, that meant in that radical faith that I had to learn honor to a different level, that I had to learn respect to a different level, that I had to do everything I did in counseling and therapy to process my own emotions and my own feelings, and to know what those were and to be solid so that I could help carry hers.
Yeah.
And so there's a process of so many different things. But then I was messaging with some friends this last week, and he said, how are you? And I said, I'm good, literally living in the faithfulness of God. And He's like, yeah, you are. And it was cool because other people have seen that. Other people have seen the journey. But when you're in radical faith and just trusting God with absolutely everything, the things that he brings forth because he loves you as his kid that much is mind blowing.
Yeah.
And that's where I'm walking. I give Elise a hard time because she'll randomly just say, I'm proud of you. And I'm like, I didn't do anything. And growing up how I grew up with my parents divorced and things, there was just, it's not something that's normal for me to just hear for no reason. And so I think that all of that ties into God's faithfulness. Another section of that is Elise's dad is awesome. And we had been dating and I'd met him once and then we were at dinner a second time and was not going to ask him his permission in front of Elise. That was going to be something off the record. And we sit there and we're like 2 hours into dinner and he just looks at Elise and I and he said, well, I don't know if this is wrong, but I feel like the Holy Spirit is just telling me to tell you that it's okay and you have my permission. I hadn't even asked him.
Wow.
But for me, and your mom brought this up, is I didn't have a good relationship with my dad. And there was a lot of times that I didn't feel valued or seen or even enough for my own dad. But then I had his approval. And so something that I strive for my whole life with my own dad in an instant, because of being faithful and radically trusting God, in an instant, I had the blessing to marry his daughter, but also his approval as a dad. And so I'm, when I say I'm in the middle of it, I'm right in the middle of what God's faithfulness looks like.
Yeah. Well, yesterday in the sermon clip that I pulled and posted on Instagram and Facebook, you said, or at least I believe this was part of it. It may have been another clip that I was looking at, but you had said that radical faith is the intersection of trust and hope, right? Surrender. That's right. That's the intersection, that you get radical faith whenever you have trust and surrender. And in that, I mean, in this season that you're walking in or that you walked through, you had to surrender. You had to live in a life where you're like, you know what, God, I don't understand. I don't get it, but I trust you, or I surrender this to you. And at the same time, you're saying, I trust you with this. I trust that what you have for me is better than I could ever imagine. Mm-hmm. And it goes back to your joke about kicking your coverage, you know? And man, it's cool seeing God's faithfulness. And I think that that's something that Dad talks about it, and this will kind of segue us into our next point. But Dad talks about with tithing that we can't outgive God. We can't outgive him because he wants to give back to us and to bless us. Whenever he asks us to tithe, it's not because he needs our money. God is not limited to money. God does not need our Benjamins.
Right.
God's God. He can do whatever the heck he wants to do. So his asking us to tithe is to see our obedience to him, to see where, if we are going to be faithful in that, if we're going to have radical faith of, you know what, maybe at the end of this month, I really do need that 250, 300, 400, 500, however much you make. I really do need that at the end of the month. However, God asked me to do something. Therefore, I'm going to live the way that God told me to live. And I'm going to be radically faithful in that. Mm-hmm. And from that radical faithfulness, like I said, you can't outgive God. From that radical faithfulness, God will be radically faithful back to you abundantly over what you can ever expect. And you gave a really, really good example. This will be the last point, and then we'll start to wrap it up. But on Sunday, you had an incredible testimony, and it was so cool. getting to hear how it started with just a simple yes to God, and then seeing the trickle down effect from you saying yes to God in a season of singleness, in a season of finding yourself as a son once again in the Father, to being the head of your household, and then to see that in your sons. Like, it's so cool what this testimony is. So I'll let you take that testimony story, because holy smokes, I told you on a Tuesday, I was up on stage closing and playing music at the end. And as you're talking, I'm like, I can't see my strings. I can't see what I'm playing. My eyes were welling up with tears. It was so cool. So I'll let you take it.
Yeah, I'll jump into that. But one quick thing on trust and surrender, and I know we're on time. But I think to fully surrender, you just have to get to the end of yourself. And you have to trust God enough in your humanity, in your mistakes, that you can be real and raw. And I've been that way. The last couple of years, I've become more that way. We've talked about it in staff. I've had conversations. It really makes me think about people like the Theo Vaughns, the Shia LaBeoufs, the Justin Biebers. I know there's conversation around Nick White and Sean Ryan, people that are extremely bold and extremely loud for other things. Yeah. And now all of a sudden there's videos and real conversations of them just being real.
Yeah.
They don't understand it. They don't fully know it, but they've come to a point. I think we talked about it at staff, but Theo Vaughn being, what he does is not always clean. There's not always, but he came to the realization that he can pray, but he has to just know that he's praying from a place that he's probably going to do the exact same thing again.
Yeah.
And I think to make that merge of trust and surrender, you have to get to a place of raw and real and vulnerability with God, that you're not holding anything back.
Yeah.
Because that's really the only place that you can fully surrender. Mm-hmm. So I would say that, and then I'll kind of transition into the testimony that God has just been so faithful to write. It did. I started, as I'd tithe, and then the last few years I decided, through the challenge here at the church to trust God and tithe off of my gross, not off of my net after taxes. That's between you and God. I'm not telling you that's what you have to do. That's what I chose to do.
Yeah,
I was already tithing. So if you're like, it's a struggle for me to tithe and be consistent off of my net, I'm not judging. I'm not telling you that's how you get blessed. I didn't do it to get blessed. I just wanted to trust even deeper. And when I asked that,
what God is convicting you of is not what God convicts other people to do. So your walk is completely different from what they're walking through.
Right. And I want to emphasize that, because I'm not telling you that if all of a sudden you tithe gross, then my testimony becomes your testimony, that what my blessing was becomes your blessing. That might be of hope, but you have to still do it out of the right heart. And so my heart was just, God, I'm already tithing every week. How do I trust you more? And he told me, tithe off your gross. So I solely just did it to be obedient.
Yeah.
Nothing other than that. And so I did that. And as I had mentioned, Elise and I had financial conversations. We had talked about finances. We had talked about priorities. We had talked about merging our bank accounts when we got married, all of the things to get it in the air. Because finances is a really tough situation anyway. And statistically, it's one of the biggest issues that causes divorces.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to make sure before we even were talking marriage, engagement, anything, that we were in the same direction. Mm-hmm. We might be at different places in that direction, but that we're moving towards the same direction. And tithing for me was one of those that was kind of a non-negotiable. I wanted to know that you trusted God enough with your finances to give that to him.
Yeah.
And so we had those conversations, and then the closer we got to marriage, those conversations became extremely in depth. We were talking not just surface level of what do you make, but what do you owe? Where are things at? How are things taken care of? What's our plan? So that we were on the same page. We got married. joined everything. And we just had the conversation. It wasn't me being a dictator. Guys, don't do that. Like, hear your wife, hear her concerns, hear her heart. But for me, it was, this is where I've been, and we both are tithing, but how do we trust God more? And I said, I think that we continue to tithe from our gross. And when you're merging finances and things, that can be kind of scary, for both people, because it's substantially different. And it was just one of those that I looked at her, I said, I think and know that God is good. And I've done this. And I said, I think that we can trust him in this. And we talked about it. We talked about it over several days, several different conversations, and came to the agreement that that's where we were going to be. So we just continued to tithe. And there were moments where it was like, man, that does make a difference. We could use that for food. We have 3 boys. One of them's a teenager. And sometimes that boy will eat enough.
It's a bottomless pit.
It is, literally. And I'm like, okay, that would really help buy 32 extra chicken nuggets for one meal. And so there's a lot of things that you play into it, but then it's always, am I going to trust God? Mm-hmm. Can I trust him radically to provide 35 chicken nuggets with the same amount of money?
Yeah.
And so we just trusted him. And there were times it was tight. There was times it didn't make sense, but we never got behind. We never were out. It was just that we tightened things up, became more diligent, became better stewards. That's still a continuation and a conversation that we have frequently, is how do we steward well? And so then we're moving forward. We're finally making progress, and we're just initiating the conversations of, at some point, we're going to have to buy a bigger vehicle. It just doesn't work with the 3 boys. But we're talking like 8 or 9 months, a year down the road. Like, let's start planning for it. Let's start budgeting for it. And all of a sudden, the wheels literally fell off. The axle broke, the wheel falls off. And I joked, and I'm like, well, the wheels did fall off today. And
I would just like to take a moment. Whenever that happened, you sent it to a group chat full of,
I did,
kind of several different guys. I'm part of the group chat, and you sent us a picture, and nobody took it seriously except for maybe 2 people in the group chat. Scott and Wyatt asked if you needed help. The rest of us were sending gifs of Dukes of Hazzard, replying back, I think I know what's wrong with it. Ain't got no gas in it.
Yeah.
Completely unserious, which now I kind of feel bad about.
It's what it is. But it was bad because, like, then I didn't have phone service. I couldn't even call the insurance company. Legitimately wouldn't have been able to call 911. But thankfully,
had something serious happen.
Yeah, a police officer pulled up behind us. He pulls up, sees Elise, points at her. Come to find out, it's her cousin. Never met him, so I got to have a 2-hour conversation with him while we were waiting on the tow truck. But it was one of those where I still trusted God, but I was super frustrated.
Yeah,
and I wasn't hurt, but I was more like, what do we do? Like, this isn't our plan. We were talking like a year from now, not anywhere close to right now. Do we want to go look for a vehicle? Car shopping is not fun when you're ready. And then when an emergency happens and you're forced into it, it's really not fun. And so we were trying to figure out, what does insurance do? What do we do? Just trying to piece it all together. And I was super frustrated in the moment where it just didn't make sense. And we'd been faithful. We'd been tithing. We hadn't missed one. And not that God would have done that had we missed one, but I was just trying to get answers. And sometimes we don't have answers. And so I settled down, and we were just in conversation. And then as it was being towed away, we were moving stuff to some family's car. And I just looked at Elise and I said, I trust and know that God is good enough, that he will provide something. And I said, I don't know. I just feel like there's somebody that could be a blessing, whether that's a car, whether that's a connection, whether that's we know somebody that owns a dealership, go talk to them. They're the most integral, no idea. But I know God has a plan and he can do something. But I also, in radically believing and trusting that God is always good, made the statement that I think there's somebody that could bless us with a car. I've seen it happen. I know it's happened. You see things all the time. Social media is a crazy thing now with how people are blessed and taken care of. And I just made this statement. And then there were some friends there, and I didn't see it. They did. And once they brought attention to it, then I looked up, but they said there's a bald eagle, and that is a sign of God's provision. And so I just made the comment. I said, I really believe and trust that God could do it, but that somebody would maybe have a vehicle that's nice enough that we could buy, not even give it to us, but that there's an opportunity for us to get something bigger.
Yeah.
And she made the comment. She said, I know that that's happened to somebody, and I physically watched it. And so out loud, I just said, well, I'm running with that testimony. And that was a Saturday. Sunday, car's at the shop. Everybody drives by, sees it sitting on its wheel. It's a mess. So we used Elise's mom's pickup for a couple days. Then we found out that the insurance would do a rental car. Got everything kind of situated there. Still trying to figure out what the plan was. And Tuesday, we were running around to sports practices and all sorts of kids' events. And your mom and dad asked if we were busy and asked if they could bring something. And I want to reiterate that it wasn't the church. They had been contacted by somebody that saw my Facebook post. I made a joke about being like Tiger Woods. I still wish I would have prayed to be a better driver in the right context of golf and not wrecking vehicles. But we just made the post. I made it lighthearted. And somebody saw that, and somebody wanted to bless our family in hopes of getting something. So they come over, and it wasn't just about that. It was the fact that we were reminded. Your mom took the time to remind both Elise and I, but looked at her and told her that you're seen, that God knows who you are, knows right where you are. And so as we're hearing that, then she's like, well, I know this is really weird, but can we film? And I'm like, this is weird. Like, she's like, well, it's anonymous. We can't say anything. You can't know. They just want to see.
Yeah.
And I said, yeah, that's fine. So your mom pulls out her phone, and your dad pulls out an envelope. There's no names on it. There's blank. And then there's a note over the check that says don't remove, because they wanted it to be anonymous. And so the sticky note in place, so I just handed the envelope to Elise, because I was already emotional at this point, because at that point, anything helps.
Yeah.
And she opens the envelope and like shows it to me. And I, like, you couldn't see your guitar strings. I couldn't see the numbers. And at first I thought it was 250, and I'm like, oh, that's amazing. And then I'm like, oh, it's $2,500. Like, God is so good, and that will help. And then we pull the envelope, like pull the check out and actually look at it. And it was a check for $25,000.
Wow.
To help us get into something that's safe and reliable for our family.
Yeah.
And just a continuation that I am continually living in God's radical faithfulness to us, because we've been in radical faith and trusting that He is good.
Yeah, man. Wow. Dude, that's so cool. What got me on Sunday was whenever you were talking about that story, and you went and picked up your car, which I got to ride in just before filming this video. It's sweet. But you picked up your car. Your three boys were with you, Gabriel, Elijah, and Benaiah. And they get in the car, and Benaiah, the first thing that he says, I don't know why I'm getting emotional whenever I say it, but the first thing that he says is, he says, this is why. This is why we trust God. This is why we believe. This is why we're faithful. Dude, that wrecked me on Sunday. It's just so cool to see, like I was saying, the trickle down, you being faithful in your season of finding yourself as a son again, finding yourself in a place of singleness, to leading your family, being the head of your household, and leading your wife well, leading your sons well, and then getting to see your sons get to witness that testimony, them get to be a part of it, because now they aren't sitting like this in the back of an Accord. They actually get to spread out and have their own seats and everything in an SUV. Like, they get to be a part of the faithfulness, the radical faithfulness of God because of your radical faithfulness to God. So, man, so cool.
It was cool, and getting to live that with them, but more them getting to see the reality of how good God is.
Yeah.
And they were super good at the dealership, even though...
Kudos to your boys for being good at a dealership.
It takes
it's hard.
forever, 4 hours, and I had most everything done beforehand. But every time we go outside, they were asking, and then we walk outside, and I said, "There it is," and they literally jumped up and down and were screaming about how good God is, and this is why we trust God. And Elijah said it like screaming it. So I'm like, I hope people inside are hearing it.
Wow.
And then we get in the car and they're both just screaming from the top of their lungs. And, you know, Gabriel's got fewer words and not as loud, but he's back there just smiling. And it's just cool to get to see that for ourselves, but then for them to get to tangibly know how good God is. And that's something that nobody or no thing can ever take that away from them. So early on for them, they're seeing how radical God is and how good he is and how faithful he is. And they get to carry that as part of their root system and their core, not just on words, but because they've seen it.
Yeah. Man, so cool. That's so cool,
God's
man.
good, man. He is beyond anything that we can think or imagine.
Amen. Well, that's the time that we got. Dude, once again, fantastic message on Sunday. It was really cool to listen to the testimony that God has given to you. And I know that there's so many people that are going to take that testimony and like I said yesterday during staff meeting, it's not like if God can do it for somebody like Josh in the negative way, but like if God can do it that radically, that big, what's to say that he can't do it for you? Mm-hmm. You know,
he wants to, and he can. He wants things to be developed and not perform. It's not performing to get something in return. But when you sell out for him, he's so eager and willing to take care of you.
Yeah, man, so good. Great message once again. Such a cool testimony.
Thanks, man.
Heck yeah.
If you got questions, stop us. It's fun to talk about. We want to steward it well. We didn't want to just share it and in no way being boastful, but I think people need to know how good God is. It's really hard sometimes to keep that at our forefront when we're praying and praying and praying and praying and nothing's changing. And it doesn't seem like anything is going right. All he needs is just a glimmer of hope, a mustard seed of faith. It's just little, but take that to a radical place where just know that he's good.
Well, I think of the song Waymaker. In the bridge of that song, it says, even when I don't see it, you're working. Even when I don't feel it, you're working. You never stop working. And man, that song is a testimony in and of itself, but also just to see it's not just even your testimony alone. It's testimonies all around us that we all get to hear about, that we all get to see, whether that be firsthand or secondhand. It's all a testimony to God is always working on your behalf. He's always working for the good of those who love him and are called according to his will, you know? So good. Thank you for taking time out of your Tuesday or Wednesday, actually, to sit down with me and to do an unpacking.
Absolutely. Thank you. Go rep Katie. She's got some cool stuff.
Premarital sex.
edgy, but it's good. I appreciate you, man. Thank you.
Heck yeah, thank you. We want to say thank you once again for tuning in to this week's Unpacking video. We'll be back next week with another Unpacking on Wednesday at 5 p.m. Again, if you haven't already, we encourage you to subscribe to our YouTube channel, leave us a like, and we encourage you to comment also. We want to know what you got from this week's Unpacking video, from the sermon that we unpacked or the topic that we unpacked. We also would love to hear if you have any ideas for us to unpack as well. So leave those in the comments section. Again, thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you back here next week, Wednesday at 5 p.m.